So this is week 978 of the Corona Apocalypse. This is our Brewer Savage Wednesday night Bible study. We've got a few faithful OGs over here on the right, and hopefully some more folks could catch us on Facebook or YouTube as we go along. But however you may be joining us and wherever you may be joining us, thanks for making us part of your day. I feel like I got that from a radio show. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Samson, the old buddy Samson. He's kind of a doofus. I can kind of relate to him, but he's a good story. He's one of my favorite characters in the Bible because I feel like I do relate to him, that everything he ever went through that was bad was completely his fault. He just did a lot of stupid things. But we're going to start with a little backstory of Samson. That way we can get what we're doing. And I've actually done this lesson before for all the Brewer Savages who remember every single thing that I say, but it was like a long time ago. It was like when I first started teaching on Wednesday nights. So I barely remembered it. I had to study it again. So maybe it'll be familiar, maybe not. But we're going to be primarily in Judges chapter 16 tonight. And we're going to do a little backstory with 13, 14, and 15, but mostly Judges chapter 16. So I'm going to pray and we'll get started. Lord, thank you for this day, and I thank you for technology that we're allowed to, or we're able to still have Bible study, and even days, weeks later, we can catch up on lessons and things, Lord, that we can still have church during this odd time. And I ask that you get all it cleared up so we can meet and have real church again. But in the meantime, Lord, thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for the ones who join us. I ask you to cleanse my heart and my mind, Lord, and forgive me for where I failed you. Help me to have a clean head of what you want me to say tonight, and that it'll make sense and be a benefit to the kingdom and to anybody who might hear it. And I thank you for your word and the truth of it. And I just ask that you would just bless this lesson in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So we are in Judges. So this is my title. I've actually got 3 points tonight. I feel like I should get my seminary degree in the mail because I have 3 points, but I guess it would be like not a full degree because they don't rhyme. So that's kind of my knock against my Baptist degree. Maybe I can get a non-denominational degree because they don't rhyme. But I'm going to go ahead and go with the title. The title tonight is How a Strong Person Becomes Weak. How a strong person becomes weak. And I guess there's more than one way for strong people to become weak. But here's how one strong dude, Samson, became weak. And maybe if we can figure out the track he went down, which is the wrong track, maybe we can avoid that if we can see his mistakes. Obviously, I'm a football coach, represent the Mortal Troopers tonight. And one of the things that I do all the time, and they make fun of me, is that I watch a lot of film. What I mean by watching film is videotape of other teams we're playing games, what they do, and all that stuff. And then I obviously watch a lot of video of what we did on the past Friday night to see what we did. But a lot of what we do is watch and see what mistakes we made so we can correct them at practice. Hopefully that by the next Friday night when it arrives, we'll have at least the issues we've already committed fixed, and then we'll have a whole new set of mistakes. If we go week to week to week to week and have the same mistakes over and over again, then that's a problem because we kind of wasted a lot of time. The idea is that we see what we did wrong and we can fix it and move on. And maybe that's what we can do a little bit here with our old buddy Samson. Now, Samson was an awesome guy. If you don't know his story, it's in the book of Judges, chapter 13, 14, 15, and 16. And it's a wild story. You're not going to read another story like it in the newspaper. But he's an interesting character in the Bible, and it was a time in the Bible history, and I'm not going to go back through all the history of the Old Testament, but there were no kings in Israel. This was a time when people called judges rule. That's why it's called the book of Judges. And they were sort of like, they weren't kings and they weren't like the president, but they were sort of in charge. They were like God's representative for the people for a certain time. And in this particular time, it was Samson. Now, Israel did a lot of boneheaded things. They just couldn't stay on the straight and narrow to please the Lord. So since they always got in trouble or disobeyed or rebelled against God, he was steadily having to punish them. So one of the things he did was he used God's enemies, the enemies of Israel's people and the enemies of God, to punish Israel. Now that seems kind of weird that he would use his enemies to punish his friends, but that's one of the things he did is he allowed Israel to lie in the bed that they made. They always making a mess out of their bed, and he made them lay in it. He let them suffer their own punishment for their own boneheadedness. And his favorite one to use a lot of the time was the Philistines. You may remember a famous Philistine named Goliath. He's probably the most famous one we know of. That's the one that old David, or another good buddy of ours that we'd like to talk about on here at the Brewer Savages. Um, he's the one that slew the great Philistine giant Goliath. David slew him with a sling and a stone, and then Goliath's own sword. He was a Philistine. But there was lots and lots of battles back and forth with the Philistines, and this is just one of them. So let me tell you a little bit more about Samson's backstory, and then we'll get into it. So this was a time when Israel was in trouble with the Lord, and he allowed them to be conquered and taken over by the Philistines. And that's really in Judges chapter 13. Let's go in verse 1. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. So they were once again slaves, or at least servants, to this great nation, neighboring nation, the Philistines. And they were in that predicament for 40 years. But every time God punishes his children, he always sends out hope. And you can read that pattern through the Bible, that he never forsakes and forgets his people, even though they may be going through a little rough patch, either from their own making, and they just, sometimes bad things happen to you because some things you do things and you get away with it, you think, but then God's keeping a record and you have punishment. And then, of course, bad things also happen whenever there was nothing that you particularly did sinfully. It's just part of God's plan for you, or part of life, or whatever you want to say. But in this time, Israel was in trouble, and for 40 years they served the Philistines. And God raised up somebody to help them out, a hero, a ruler, a leader for their time of trouble. And it was this guy, Samson. So Samson's parents got a visit from a holy messenger saying that they were going to have a baby, and it was going to be a very special baby. He was going to be what they call a Nazarite. And I'm not going to go again through all the Old Testament history, but these were kind of special folks. The deal about a Nazarite was they were usually specially blessed of God because they chose or were chosen to be set aside for God. And they had certain restrictions. Now, anybody who lives for the Lord has certain restrictions in their life, because you have to live by the Bible and do what it says to do. So all of Israel had laws and rules they had to follow, but there were a few extra ones for the Nazarites, and there were three in particular. The three were they couldn't have any wine or strong drink at all in their lifetime. Now, drunkenness is always forbidden through the Bible, but there are occasions where, especially in those times, wine was recommended because of various reasons, either for medicinal purposes, like we would take cough syrup that has alcohol in it, or whether it be because they were in a place where the drinking water wasn't safe. But for whatever reason, wine was allowed in some places, but never drunkenness. But for these few Nazarites, they couldn't even touch the stuff. They could have zero of it. Another thing they couldn't do is they couldn't touch any dead bodies, any dead carcass. Now, there's a debate about that, or whether that was just human dead bodies, or whether that applied to animals or not. And I don't know the answer to that. But I would assume the reason for that would be for a lot of reasons, but obviously one reason would be for disease. Anytime you find a dead carcass laying out in the woods somewhere along the side of the road, you don't want to go messing with it because it could be bad for you. And then the third requirement is, especially for Samson, the famous story is, they weren't allowed to ever cut their hair. They had to let their hair grow all their life. So that's what the heavenly messenger came and told Samson's parents. A certain man of Zorah, the dad's name was Manoah. So Manoah and his wife got this message. All right, so Samson was born. And Samson's great gift was he was super, super, super strong. There's a movie I want to say was on Netflix that I saw it. And I don't know if I watched the whole thing. It was a movie about Samson. And it was a little bit, it was not the best made movie I've ever seen, but it's obviously a good story. But if you don't have a lot of imagination and you want to kind of get a picture of how awesome it would be to be the world's strongest man, not like, pretty strong, but like ridiculously superhuman, I guess you can watch that video and get a little bit of idea. But Samson was ridiculous. He was a one-man army. He could literally do the work of 1,000 men. And he does that. If you read along here, maybe in chapter 15, he actually slays 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. But I want to get to the meat of this discussion tonight and try to figure out exactly what lesson we can learn from Samson. And like I said, he's one of my favorite Bible characters there are. So I could do a lot of lessons about Samson, and I have. But this is probably the moral of the story. Like, the biggest thing he did was he screwed up. And he screwed up in some ways that seem very obvious of he shouldn't have done that. It seems very obvious there's some red flags and some signs along the way he should have noticed. Hey, maybe I ought to detour here or slam on the brakes a little bit or turn around. But he didn't. He ignored all the signals. So let's just go through it. How a strong person, or at least this strong person, becomes weak. How a strong person becomes weak. Number one, become disobedient. Now, I already told you that Samson, above your average Hebrew, had some special rules on him because he was a Nazarite. And his first rule was no strong drink, no dead carcasses, and couldn't cut his hair. Now, I don't think that we have I may have overlooked it, but I don't have a recorded instance where he touched a lot of strong drink. I'm sure he did. There were several times he appeared to be partying, but I don't think it actually says he was drunk. But he broke the other two rules, and obviously he got his hair cut, which was the spoiler of the story. But here's the other one where he broke the rule. I've kind of already summarized this on the rules, but if you want to check the rules, they're in Judges 13, 4-7. But it says that he'll be a Nazarite from his mother's womb. And in verse 7, it says, this is Judges 13:7. But he said to me, behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. So then drink no wine nor strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for the small child shall be a Nazarite from the womb to the day of his death. All right, so there were some special restrictions on Samson. But I said he became disobedient. So let's see what he did. Flip over to chapter 14, which is the next chapter, verses 5-9. Let's see some of the things that Samson did. All right, in verse 5, it says, then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah, and behold, a young lion came toward him roaring. And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion into pieces, as one tears a young goat. He did not tell his father or his mother what he had done, and he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. Now, the backstory is they're going to visit a girl that he wants to marry. But on the way, this lion jumps out on him, and he literally kills the lion with his bare hand. So nothing right there is disobedient. But let's check out what he later does. Verse 8, and after some days, he returned to take her. And he turned aside to see the carcass. So he went back to visit this girl again. And on the way on the same road, he goes and visits the carcass of the lion. And behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion and honey. And he scraped it into his hands, and he went on, eating as he went. And he came to his father and his mother, and gave some to them, and they ate. But he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of the lion. Now, I don't know about how gross that might be. I guess bees are clean or dirty as they ever are. I don't guess it matters if they're in a tree or in a rotten log or in a rotten lion. Whether or not this honey was gross, that's not the point of this story. I wouldn't particularly have wanted it. And maybe that's why he didn't tell his mom and daddy where he got it, because they might have refused him. But what he did was he touched this dead carcass of this lion. So he broke one of the cardinal rules he couldn't break. Again, I may have skipped over it, but I'm pretty sure that in his escapades, he may have broken number 2 of the rules about the strong drink. But there's some other things that even for us are obvious rules that Samson did and he broke that were wrong. Flip over to chapter 16, verse 1. Samson went to Gaza, which is one of the cities of the Philistines. And there he saw a prostitute, and he went in to her. Okay, so I don't feel like I have to have a whole lot of explanation there, but that's what we call disobedience to the Lord. Prostitutes are off limits for you to be visiting and going into. This guy had a special blessing. A special blessing was superhuman strength. And superhuman doesn't even do it justice. If you want to watch a video, like a superhero movie or, the Avengers or Superman or something like that, that doesn't really do it justice of what Samson could do, because first of all, this is a true story. Secondly, he didn't have any fancy gadgets or guns or gizmos. He was just that bad of a dude. He literally could handle armies himself. Let's get back again. This is chapter 15, verse 14. And again, this is another one of his stories. Samson created the trouble here that he's dealing with. But God used Samson to get back at the Philistines because they were Israel's enemy. They were afflicting God's people. And even though Israel probably deserved a little afflicting, God was still taking care of his own. And Samson was just God's tool to do that. And God came on him and empowered him. Here's one of the examples. This is one of my favorite Samson stories. Well, I got a lot of all the stories they tell about Samson are wild. One time, he burned down some fields by catching a bunch of foxes and tying their tails together and putting firebrands between their tails. And as the foxes went wild and crazy, they drove this fire and burned all these fields down. Another time, they were trying to trap him, and he carried the gates of the city off and set them on the next hill over just to mess with them because he carried literally the whole city gates. This is the one that's crazy to me. Verse 14 of chapter 15. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. Now, that's the key thing. Every time Samson did something amazing, this preceded it. The Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. And the ropes were on his arms because they had him tied up, became as flax that has caught on fire. And his bonds melted off his hand. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey and put it in his hand, put out his hand and took it. And with it, he struck 1,000 men. And Samson, he made a little rhyme here. With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have struck down 1,000 men. So he was a bad dude, okay? That's what I'm trying to get at. He was a really bad dude. He had special powers given to him by the Lord for the purpose of the Lord's mission. And Samson had all these things that made him strong. But his first downfall was he became disobedient. He was disobedient in his moral life. He broke God's commandments in general, being, thou shalt not commit adultery. That's one of the good ones. He broke that with the prostitute because he was already married. And he just hung out with bad folks. Okay, so number one, become disobedient. If you're a strong Christian, if you're trying to walk for the Lord and you're in your spiritual high and you're on fire for the Lord and you're reading your Bible and you're witnessing to people and you're serving the kingdom and you sing in the choir at church, whatever it is you do, and you want to fall off that rock and you want to become no longer in a good position with the Lord, become disobedient. Step one of how to fail. Become disobedient. Step two, become arrogant. Samson became arrogant. Now, I may be a stretch to say Samson became arrogant as if there was a time when he wasn't arrogant and then he became arrogant. Seems to me that Samson was pretty much arrogant from the first time he gets to speak in this. Maybe he was a sweet kid. I don't know. But the first time he actually has a speaking part in this story about himself, it didn't take him very many sentences before he came off as pretty arrogant. But what I mean specifically by arrogant, I'm not just saying the context clues of what he actually did and said. I'm going to show you one verse that shows that he was arrogant. And what I mean by arrogant was that he thought he was powerful. He thought the good things that he had in his life were because Samson did it, because Samson deserved it, because Samson was mighty, because Samson was awesome. And it really wasn't God doing it. He just was, because every time he needed to be, he was. And he didn't ever have an off day. He never had a swing and a miss. Samson was the dude he always wanted to be. And he became arrogant in that and thought it was because of his doing. And I feel like we do that in our life a lot of times. Sometimes I start thinking, hey, I'm doing pretty good. The principal came by and, he liked my lesson plan this week. Or we won the football game because I called the right play at the right time on defense. Or my wife smiled at me really good because I mowed the grass just right. And I start thinking, hey, it's me. I'm a dude and I can do these things and I deserve all the good things I get because I have overcome mediocrity and I have risen above your average man. I'm smarter than the average bear and it's me. I'm doing these things. And when somebody brags on my kids of how sweet or how pretty my kids are, or how smart they are, and I think, man, they're just so lucky I gave them half of my DNA. And they're also lucky that I married a good woman and gave them the other half of her DNA. So it's me. I chose the right woman. I have the right this and that, and they're special because of me. Forgetting that all the good things I have in life, I didn't earn. I mean, I can't control how I am or who I came from or who my parents are or really even who my children are. I can't control the thoughts of my superiors. I can do my best, but there's so many things in my life that go right that are completely not because of my doing. And even if I think that something is my doing, God still gives me health and breath and life to do those things. Either way, I'm beholden to him. And sometimes the better my life goes, the more I forget that. I'm a praying dude when things are going bad. I mean, when life's tough and the bills can't be paid and, I'm feeling like I might be getting the flu or, I haven't had any symptoms since Corona started. But if I started sniffling and sneezing with a fever, I'd be on my knees, man. I'd be praying, Lord, help me. But when things are going good Jeremy Haynes sometimes gets to feeling himself, gets to thinking, hey, it's because I deserve it, it's because I've been doing it. So let me give you the verse. Now I'm skipping a little ahead because my third point is actually going to precede this verse. The long story short was Samson did lose his strength and become captive of the Philistines. And the reason why is because he got his hair cut. He broke God's other rule, the last and final rule, and maybe the most unique rule for Samson particularly was God said, don't ever cut your hair. And when he got his hair cut, he lost his strength. But this is the sad part. So I'm going to read, this is chapter 16, verse 20. So this is Delilah, his crazy girlfriend, which I'm going to talk more about in the next point. And she said, the Philistines are upon you. She just cut his hair. She says, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he woke up from his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times, and I will shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord left him. That's the arrogance. If you're ever in your life and the Lord's with you, and then all of a sudden the Lord's not with you, and you didn't even realize it, you didn't even know the Lord left you, that probably means you're so full of yourself and arrogant that there wasn't much room for the Lord to be in your mind and your heart because you are full of you. You're full of yourself. And if you want to become a weak person from your strength, disobey the Lord, just become disobedient, and then become arrogant. Start thinking that the good things you have are because of you. This is another way you can say this is pride. Samson was so prideful and thinking he deserved and he did and he earned that when God left him, he didn't even feel it. Whenever I'm at the house, sometimes we got this exercise bike. You can tell I just use it all the time, but I try to. And one of the things I do to make myself exercise is I watch Netflix on my iPad because I'm not going to just sit there and exercise with nothing to do. I got to distract my mind so I don't concentrate on how miserable I feel. So while I'm watching the iPad, I watch Netflix or whatever I'm watching. I put my headphones in. And if somebody were to come in the house with my door closed, I guess they could rob my whole house. And I wouldn't know it because all I can hear is my headphones. My wife could holler at me, or, the kid could stub their toe, or whatever it is, somebody could need me, or, could be a tornado coming. I wouldn't know it because I'm oblivious to it because I've got something occupying my time and my ears and my mind and my space. And that's what Samson did. He had so much occupying his mind besides the Lord that he didn't even know that the Lord had walked out. I could get off that exercise bike and take my headphones out and find an empty house because Mallory went to town or she went somewhere, and I would never know it because I was oblivious to my surroundings for a little while. Now, I'm not incriminating myself. Don't hate on me, Mallory. Sometimes you got to tune out to get some jobs done. But my point is, if you ever tune out the Lord, you might wind up without him and not even realize it. And then when you go to need him, you're not in tune with him. Now, again, I'm not trying to say that you'll lose your salvation or the Lord will ever completely forsake you. What I'm saying is sometimes we try to do things the way we always did them when they worked for us in the past, not knowing we didn't do, it wasn't a ritual. It wasn't some sort of rain dance that the Lord worked in our life because we did the right things or stepped the right steps in the right order like a cheat code. The Lord blesses us. And if you don't stay in tune with him, if you're not connected to his fountain, if you're not always connected to the vine, if you're not always in fellowship with the Lord, sometimes when you're in greatest need or you expect to be able to, on demand, snap your fingers and get what you need, you might be abandoned by your own kicking out. You may have moved the furniture around to where there's no space for anything in your life but you, and you can be found that the power you were counting on wasn't yours to begin with and you lost it. All right, trying to move along here so I don't have this forever long message. Point number 3, if you want to be a strong person who becomes weak, become disobedient, become arrogant, and love the wrong people. Love the wrong people. Now, this is the youth Bible study portion of this lesson. I mean, this applies to everybody of all ages, but this is especially youth thing. I've known lots and lots and lots from the time I was a kid and my friends to the time now that I've grown up and I see young people and even older people from any age on down. One of the biggest problems that people have following the Lord and serving the Lord and remaining a strong Christian is because they get caught up with the wrong people and they just get caught up with them like, they're bored and they're hanging out. I'm talking about they put their love into the wrong kind of people. And the most obvious example of this would be the wrong kind of boyfriends or girlfriends. I challenge you as a young person, if you're unmarried, be very, very cautious on who you date, because dating is not like your day to day walk where you encounter strangers that need the Lord and you try to win them to the Lord. Your dating life is you're trying to find a partner to serve the Lord with you. And if you go hanging out with the wrong kind of people and you're allowing yourself to compromise to be able to maintain the love relationship that you should have never been a part of, it's going to be a good way for you to fall off. Maybe you were trying to live right, but you got tired of being lonely and bored and sad and single. And you had high standards, but you let those standards drop. Maybe you're dating a person who doesn't match up with the things that the Bible teaches of how you're supposed to be dating and marrying. I mean, the Bible doesn't tell a whole lot about who you're supposed to date, but it does have some things to say about a good husband and a good wife. And obviously, if they're not a good husband and wife material, they're not good dating material, because that's kind of the point, right? You're trying to get to the marriage if you're going through the dates. Maybe you've got standards of your sexuality, of some rules and some guidelines that you're trying to live by to please the Lord and to live your body as a holy vessel for Him, or as His temple. But you like somebody, they don't quite have those same standards. And then next thing you know, you're with them for a while, and you maybe begin to feel something stronger than like for them. Maybe you love them. And then the next thing you know, you got a choice to make. Am I going to follow their standards, or are they going to follow my standards? And that's a hard battle to fight when you're 6 months deep into a relationship with somebody and you find out that they ain't got the same morals and relationship status with the Lord that you desire. It's a whole lot harder to give that person the boot than it is to succumb to the temptation to screw up. And not just screw up sexually. There's lots of ways where boys and girls get in relationships and they mess each other up mentally and socially. They can be controlled. There's abusive relationships. There's relationships where they plant doubts in your mind that even gets your family. They may ruin your family relationship. They'll definitely can ruin your God relationship if you spend more time with them on Sundays than you do at the church, or you spend more time with them in the middle of the night than you do sleeping or studying your schoolwork or reading your Bible, doing your daily walk. If you allow somebody you love to be number one in your life, in that they consume you, and they're not the right kind of person, that's the more you love them, the closer you get to Jesus, then the more you love them, the further you're going to get from Jesus. And your strength will soon become a weakness. So let's just read about what Samson did, and I'm going to quit harping on that, and then we'll be done. So this is all of chapter 16, but this is the story of Delilah, the great villainess. Is that a word? Female villain of the story. But really, the villain is Samson in his own stupidness and arrogance and hard-headedness. So basically, Delilah was a Philistine. She was of the enemy. She was an enemy spy. And Samson liked her. There wasn't any problem with Samson liking her. But the Philistine leaders got to her, and they said, hey, I know you're dating this guy. We don't like him. So we'll pay you a pretty good price, 1,100 pieces of silver. This is chapter 16, verse 4. I'm reading the ESV. 1,100 pieces of silver if you'll figure out what makes Samson so strong and then make him not so strong so we can capture him. So Delilah does. She tries to do this. So she said, all right, Samson, what makes you so strong, baby? I love you. What makes you so strong? So Samson lies to her. He says, if they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, fresh bowstrings, and I'll be weak as any other man, and they can capture me. So he goes to sleep. And what does he do? He wakes up to find that this girlfriend of his that he loves has tied him up. Hey, baby, what makes you weak? Bowstrings make me weak. He wakes up and he's tied with bowstrings. Red flag number 1. If you tell somebody what your weakness is, and the next thing you find out is they're exploiting your weakness, maybe they're not looking out for you. He was loving the wrong person. But he lied to her, so bowstrings didn't make him weak. So when the Philistines came to trap him, he broke the bowstrings, just like he did last time he was tied up, and he whooped them, and he had a big laugh about it. So she comes to him again. This is verse 10. Then Delilah said to Samson, behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. So she's all sad about it. And please tell me how you might be bound. So he said to her, if they bind me with new ropes that have not been used. So he tried new bowstrings, now he's trying new ropes that have not been used before. Then I'll be weak like any other man. It's a special trick. If the rope's new, I can't break it. So what does he do? He falls asleep again, and she ties him up with a new rope. Number two, stupid sign to ignore. Oh, Samson, because he's full of himself. He's arrogant. He thinks that there is nothing that anybody can do to him that's going to hurt him. So he sleeps with no fear, even telling people how to trap him. He's not worried about it. He's not worried about the ambush in the night. He's not worried about a crazy woman hurting him because he can't be hurt. He is invincible. He is Mr. Israel 2020 BC, whenever it was. Can't touch him. So he falls asleep. The Philistines jump on him. He wakes up, breaks the rope, whoops the Philistines, has another good chuckle. Ha ha ha. They couldn't whoop him. So let's just read this next section. This is how you know Samson loved her and that she was the wrong person. Verse 13. Then Delilah said to Samson, until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you might be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head, because in growing his long hair and not cutting his hair, he also had he had it braided, he had it in 7 locks. He had 7 locks of hair. If you weave these 7 locks with a web and fasten it tight with a pin, then I shall become weak like another man. So he's getting closer to the truth. Now he's at least got the hair involved in the conversation. But he said, you got to weave my hair in the web and I'll be weak. So while he slept, now this is not random, okay? Somebody can't braid your hair into this web exactly how you told him to do it and it'd be like an accident or like, oh, I was just messing with your hair, baby, and you got tangled up. No, she was trying to kill him. So while he slept, Delilah took the 7 locks of his head and wove them into a web, and she put them in a pin and whatever. As if the Philistines are on you, Samson. And he woke up from his sleep and he pulled the pin away from the loom and he whooped them and they all ha ha ha. He had a big laugh about it again. So he mocked her these 3 times. Verse 15. Did I say 3? Number 3, Samson. Stupid number 3. Verse 15, she said to him, how can you say, I love you? Baby, how can you say you love me when you won't please me the way I want to be pleased? How can you say you love me when you won't try something new with me? How can you say you love me when you won't drink this drink with me? How can you say you love me? And it could be a friend. It ain't got to be a boyfriend or girlfriend. Hey, bro, how can you say that we're buds and you won't even hang out with us on the weekend? Or every time you hang out, you're always telling us, don't be doing all that bad stuff. You're not one of us. You don't want to be part of us. You don't want to be part of it. You're different. You are not willing to do the things we do. So it's because you don't care. We're not close enough. I thought we were friends. Whatever. You're stupid. You're lame. I don't want any part of it. If somebody's trying to get you to do the wrong things, they're not the person you're supposed to be loving. The person you're supposed to be loving are the people who are helping you grow closer to God. When I say that, I don't mean that you don't love sinners. I'm talking about the people that you are dependent on, that you are spending your life with as an attempt to grow towards Christ. We should always have people in our life that we're trying to reach for the gospel. We're always supposed to be trying to take somebody who doesn't have what we have and bring them to what we have. What I'm talking about is the people that you open your soul up to, that you make yourself vulnerable to, the people that you allow to see your weaknesses, like Samson did. He was trying to show Delilah his weakness. She didn't need to see that. She was not the kind of person. He was loving the wrong person. I thought I could get really specific with this, but I feel like if you don't get what I'm saying by now, then you don't want to. There's people that are going to listen to this, hopefully, if my youth group watches this, and they are dating the wrong people. There are youth that we used to have, they're no longer part of this group because they dated the wrong person, and that person drew them away from the youth group and the Lord. Now, I'm not saying that you got to be a part of the youth group to be going to heaven, but I'm saying if you get out of church because you were dating somebody, probably that's not the best relationship for you. And even if they're trying to do the right thing, you're probably bringing them down now. And there's been other people who have gotten out of our relationship with our youth group because of the friends they chose to hang out with. This is the most telling point, I think. If you are a strong person for Christ, or you want to be a strong person for Christ, and you want to become weak, be disobedient to God, be full of yourself thinking that you did all the good things that you've got, and love the wrong people, get caught with the wrong people. So let's finish our story. She said to him, how can you say I love you? Verse 15. When your heart is not with me, you have mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me where your great strength lies. And she pressed him hard with her words day after day and urged him. His soul was vexed to death. She worried him to death, and he would not see the hints. He loved her. He thought he did. And he couldn't turn her away. He was too far in. He was pot committed. There's a little playing card reference for you. He had sunk too much into this relationship to let it burn up. So he stuck it, and he's going to ride it out till the wheels fell off, and the wheels fell off. So she pressed him and vexed him to death. She worried him to death. And verse 17 says, and he told her all his heart. And he said to her, a razor has never come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If my head is shaved, then my strength will leave me, and I will become weak like any other man. And she knew he wasn't lying this time. She knew so much, she went and told the enemies to come, and they paid her in advance because she said, he has told me everything. Verse 18, when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart. You got to be careful who you love, because that's a very vulnerable situation. It's like cheating. You know, I walk up down the street and there's a lot of people that I'm ready for. I mean, a stranger comes up to me and starts acting crazy and wants to hurt me. I'm going to be a little bit more ready for it than I am my very best friend in the world. That's going to catch me by surprise. That's why they have the term backstabbing, because it's somebody close to you that you turned your back on because you thought you could trust them that hurts you. And if you start loving the wrong people, that's where you're the most vulnerable. And Samson was vulnerable. He told her his whole heart. And she had the plot. So she told the Philistines, come up again, for he has told me all his heart. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands. She made him to sleep on her knees, and she called a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Samson must have been some kind of hard sleeper. That might be why I have this little doubt about the wine. Maybe he was hungover a little bit, because I don't know. Maybe they had sleeping pills back in the day that I didn't know about. But Samson sure was a hard sleeper. He got tied up several times and got his hair braided once and got his head shaved once, and he still didn't woke up. So the man shaved his head, shaved the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he woke up from his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times, and I will shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. And the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze shackles. And he ground at the mill in the prison. Now, fortunately for Samson and for us, that's not the end of the story, but that's where I'm going to end my story. Read verse 22 through 31 if you want to hear the rest of the story. But I think this is a great lesson for us. Samson was great for years. I think it said that for 20-something years he was judging. He was fighting against the Philistines. They couldn't get him, but they finally did get him. And it started with his own disobedience. He started breaking God's rules. When he started breaking God's rules and hanging out with prostitutes and wild people, he became arrogant because he started cheating on God's rules a little bit and still having success. So he took that first little bit of rebellion and still having a pretty good life. He started saying, hey, maybe it was me the whole time that was awesome and not God. So he became arrogant. And when he became arrogant, God left him to his own devices, and Samson didn't even know it. And finally, he loved the wrong person. He loved the wrong people. Samson chose bad relationships, and it tore his life apart. He was blinded. He was enslaved. Now, these are physical things, but they're also spiritual things because the Lord was giving him this power. And in our Christian lives, if you want to be effective for the Lord, whether that's in your mission field or whether that's in your home or whether that's in your relationships with your family or your school example or whatever it is that you're trying to do for the Lord, if you want to be effective in those things, you need to be strong. And this lesson is not about how to be strong. That's a good lesson for another day. But this is how you can definitely become weak, become disobedient to the Lord, become arrogant, and love the wrong people. So that's it. My challenge for the night. It looks like our viewers have tuned out. Wah, wah. But maybe they'll catch it on YouTube. But this has been a lesson for Jeremy Haynes. I have very much been Samson and been in trouble of my own disobedience, arrogance, and caught up with the wrong people. So my challenge to you is to follow Samson's example in reverse and don't do these things. All right, that's it. Catch me next time. Next week, hopefully we'll be back doing the same thing. Maybe soon we can be in person, but until then,